as we sit down every day to make a decision about what we eat, or we go to the store to buy some food, we need to realize whatever we put into our body is either going to take our health down or build our health back up. And it all works at the level of the defense systems.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. As you were describing that, Dr. Lee, I was thinking about a bath, right? And I was thinking, okay, well, if an overflowing bath, when the water goes up and it starts to leak out, if that's the disease, or let's say that's cancer, every day we're sort of filling up our bath, let's say. But as long as the drain's working well, the water's staying down, it's not getting to the top. But if we're doing enough stuff that's actually blocking that drain, then actually we're not going to be able to repair the rising water level, and that water level is going to sort of spill out, and then we've got a disease, then we've got cancer. It's probably not a perfect analogy, but do you think there's something in that?
Yeah. Let me kind of build on what you just said. So you've got the drain keeping the water flowing and clean and at the right level, and you've got the water coming in, and that balance of where the water line needs to be. Now let's add some more. Now let's take a garbage pail filled with food bits, and now let's pour those in the drain as well. Okay. Yeah. Now you're contaminating the water. And if you have more of the drain opening to remove those bits, you're going to keep the water clean. But if you actually stop up the drain, then the garbage starts to accumulate. And that's actually part of the problem as well, is damage to our body accumulates over time. And that's why the bad decisions that we make really take, over the course of months or years, they have a consequence. And the good decisions also have the same type of time honored ability to build up on our behalf.
Well, in terms of empowering people, in terms of what they can do, and this is what a lot of your work is about, food has power here. Specifically, we're talking about DNA damage. Food has the ability to, make that drain bigger or put new drains in the bath, so there's more ability to kind of repair the damage. So, we're talking again about these 5 defense systems. I've gone straight in for number 4 that you mentioned, DNA. Could you maybe mention some foods that we can think about consuming that might have an impact on this particular defense system?
Yeah, well, so some amazing research has been done looking at which foods can help protect our DNA. And some of them are very ordinary, like a kiwi fruit that you might eat at breakfast. That brown fuzzy ball, you cut it open, it's got this emerald green interior with a little white starburst. It's kind of tart and sweet at the same time. Well, that kiwi is packed with vitamins and antioxidants. And it's been shown that eating just one kiwi a day can actually cause your blood to be fortified to neutralize about 60% of the incoming damage from DNA. And if you eat 3 kiwis a day, okay, which is pretty easy, right? I mean, you peel it, you cut it up, you put it into a yogurt. Okay, it's something that's simple. Actually, will help your DNA build itself back up, so that damaged DNA will be repaired. So don't forget. Think about the way of protecting your DNA. I remember an old video game called Missile Command, and this is where from the top of the screen there are all these missiles that are descending down on your planet. And what you had to do is to be able to fire and try to neutralize all the missiles, and that's what antioxidants actually do. Yeah. But it's really hard to prevent all the missiles from coming in. And so occasionally you actually have one that gets through the shields and creates a crater. That's damage. And so neutralizing the incoming is like antioxidants, but building back the damaged DNA, well, that's important too, because that's like patching a pothole in the highway, in the roadside, so other cars don't have a problem on it. And so here's an example of a food, a kiwi, that can actually do that. But there are other foods that can also have varying degrees of protection of your DNA as well.
Yeah, it makes me happy, that example, because my dad, who's no longer alive, I remember as a kid, Dr. Lee, he used to say to me, keep eating kiwi fruits. He'd come back from the supermarket with, these bags of kiwi fruits. So they're really, really good for you. They're rich in vitamin C. Which of course is true, but obviously you're taking it up a notch now. You're saying, yes, it's rich in vitamin C, but actually it's also helping us repair DNA. And I guess to me, there's a wider point here, which is, my dad, 20, 30 years ago, probably said it's rich in vitamin C. So thought there was a value on feeding his children that food because of the impact on our health. And as science progresses, I guess we're learning more about the magic of this, quite ordinary food, the kiwi fruits. It makes me wonder, how much about food do we still not know? Like we're learning. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like we think we know so much, and of course we know more than we knew 20 years ago, but what are we going to find out in 10 years and 20 years about the magical properties of these foods?
Well, what you're actually talking about is what I'm working on, which is a new field of research called food as medicine. So the slogan or the saying "food as medicine" was attributed to Hippocrates, 3,000 years ago. But in fact, back then there were no medicines, so food was the only thing that was around. Today we have a lot of medicines, and it's because in the quest to develop medicines, we've employed some really deep science, molecular biology, genomics. We can drill right down inside the cell to figure out what happens and why, and what the consequences are, and how the cells work together. Well, one of the reasons that I went into nutrition was because I realized that food was something that could be used for prevention. You wouldn't want to use drugs for prevention, but the problem with food, nutrition, the criticism that many of us in the medical world have, about the idea of using food for healing was historically it was the lack of evidence, right? So we have a lot of evidence about drugs. We almost have nothing about foods. I mean, that's the dismissive tone that I think you probably were exposed to as well as I for most of our education. However, what's happening now, and I'm one of the people leading the charge in this, we can use the same technologies that are used to develop pharmaceuticals. And instead of throwing a drug into the system to see what happens, we can actually start to throw foods into those systems and see what happens as well. In fact, you can even compare foods and drugs and see which one wins. And that's something that I've been doing for the last decade, is really trying to use the same rigorous scientific methodology used for drug development in order to be able to study the impact of food.
Yeah, and I think you are in many ways uniquely placed to do this and move this field on, because you've got so much experience in the development of drugs and in research. So obviously you know how that whole system works. And because you are this way inclined to see the healing potential of foods, you can actually do that. And I feel that's really important to get that kind of traction, primarily with the medical profession, but also I think across wider society. I've had on the podcast all kinds of people on in the past talking about various aspects of food. You're like, Professor Felice Jacka from Australia, who conducted the SMILES trial, showing how food can impact and in some cases reverse depression. Dr. Drew Ramsey, this nutritional psychiatrist in New York, using food to help people with their moods. But I do think there's something very fresh about your approach that I really, really like and resonate with. This idea that food and drugs can be compared. Can you give us an example of that, where you've seen that food might have equal benefits, if not more benefits, than a drug?
Yeah, well, so we have been developing treatments for cancer that are designed to starve a cancer by cutting off its blood supply. And that's the process of angiogenesis that is hijacked by tumors, by cancer cells, to selfishly develop their own blood supply, right? So I told you the body has normal circulation to feed healthy tissues. Well, cancers can sometimes hijack that. So one of the new ways to treat cancer is actually to give a drug that can intercept a cancer's ability to recruit a private blood supply. That's starving a cancer, cutting off its blood supply, can't get oxygen and nutrients, can't grow. Okay, so I was one of the people to help develop the systems to develop those drugs. There have been over a dozen drugs that have been approved by health authorities to be able to achieve this in colon cancer, brain cancer, lung cancer, so on and so forth. Now, in that same system, we've actually thrown different food substances. And as an example, we took a drug that is a designer drug to stop angiogenesis, And then we actually also through blinded, so we didn't know which one was which, a substance that turned out to be the powdered extract from just regular green tea, a cup of green tea. And we found that they were, in that system, they went head to head against each other. And you could actually get the same effect in that test system. So now the question is, we've looked at this in the lab. How does this actually play out in real people, in the real world? Well, there are studies now that show that even 2 to 3 cups of tea a day can lower your risk of developing ovarian cancer, for example, by up to 50%. This is a gigantic study in Europe called the EPIC study that have looked at all the different food patterns and dietary consumptions over time to look for these correlations. And so food as medicine research is different from pharmaceutical research. Okay. Pharmaceutical research, you take one pill or one drug and you get a group of people to make them as similar as possible. And then the only thing you do to people is give them that one drug, and everything else is, we hope, to control it so that there's no other variables. Well, foods can't be studied like that. You can't give somebody only green tea to drink for, months at a time, or a tomato to eat. That's the only thing that you can eat. And foods don't work like drugs. I mean, a drug, you could squash a headache, in 20 minutes with a powerful drug or a migraine. But with food, the benefits of food, because it's so much more natural and because it leverages your body's own defense systems, the benefits take time and they build up over time. And so you're talking about research studies that could take months or years even to fully appreciate just how beneficial that is. So this is how we do food as medicine research. We look for benefits in real populations of real people, like people drinking green tea. How well does that prevent different types of cancer? Then we back it up to say, can we run a small clinical trial, a small group of people that we can control to see if we get a similar effect? Then we go back into the lab and we kind of say, well, now what happens if you feed animals that actually with green tea, can we, an animal subject, can we actually see that benefit? Then we can even go deeper and start going that mile deep. What happens at the cellular level? What happens at the genetic level? And so food as medicine is really taking that macroscopic community-wide level view and then drilling it right down to that molecular pathway. And so I happen to be one of the people that actually can traverse that entire journey with what I've done.
If you enjoyed that clip from my podcast, here's another powerful clip that is really going to help you with your health and happiness.
You just want to shock the system, then your body gets to reset. And one of the most popular things to do in the longevity world now is